The streetlights hummed low over the damp sidewalk, their glow reflecting off puddles left by the evening rain. I stood beneath a flickering neon sign that read, "McCready's Bar and Lounge," cradling my saxophone like a fragile thing, my fingers twitching as if they already knew how the night would end. My name is Otis, Lucky, Monroe, though the nickname is a cruel joke. Everything I touch turns to dust. My gigs fall through, my lovers leave, and my rent is always overdue. But the blues never abandon me. They are my only certainty. I took a deep breath and stepped inside. The place smelled of stale beer and broken dreams. The regulars barely lifted their heads. They'd seen me before, watched me fumble with my case, spill my drink, knock over a chair. Tonight would be no different. I approached the stage. I was here to play with the Hollow Keys, a ragtag band that barely tolerated my misfortune. As I pulled my sax from the case, the mouthpiece tumbled to the floor and rolled under the bassist's foot. A sigh rippled through the band. "Jesus, Lucky!" the drummer muttered, shaking his head. I mumbled an apology, retrieved the mouthpiece, and tried to shake off the feeling that tonight would be just another string of bad breaks. The set began, and for a moment, everything was right. The wail of my sax cut through the barroom haze, smooth and sorrowful. I poured my soul into it, eyes closed, body swaying. Here, in the music, luck had no say. But the moment was fleeting. In the middle of a solo, the reed cracked. My fingers slipped, and the notes came out jagged, ugly. Someone chuckled at the bar. I tried to recover, but a bead of sweat rolled into my eye, blinding me just long enough for me to step backward, directly into the bassist. He stumbled, crashed into the drummer, and the song collapsed into chaos. The bar owner, a thick-necked man named Gus, waved me off. "Enough, Lucky." "That's it." I nodded, too defeated to argue. I packed up, careful not to drop my sax again, and trudged into the night. The rain had started up once more, and of course, I'd forgotten my umbrella. The city breathed around me, indifferent to my struggles. My feet led me to the river. I leaned on the railing, gripping my sax with both hands, the only thing in my life that hadn't abandoned me, though God knows, I'd given it plenty of reasons to. The thought flickered across my mind, maybe I should just let it go, let the water take it, see if the blues could float. But instead I lifted it to my lips. No audience, no expectations, just me and the night. The first note was soft, barely more than a whisper, but it carried. It drifted over the water, curling like smoke, slipping into the cracks of the city. For once, nothing fell, nothing broke. I played on, and for a little while I was lucky. When I finished the melody of my lament, it seemed to me that the raindrops were being brought down by a flurry of applause. I even bowed theatrically and suddenly realized that the applause was real. Nearby, a man stood under an umbrella, clapping. I lowered my sax, blinking at the stranger. He was tall, stately, older, his expression both amused and intrigued. He took a step closer, nodding appreciatively. "Hell of a song," he said. "Hell of a night to play it." I exhaled, my fingers still resting on the keys. The blues never abandoned me. But tonight, maybe, just maybe, something else had found me too. "Victor Langley." The man introduced himself, extending a hand. "I've heard a lot of music in my time, but you've got something special." I hesitated before shaking his hand, unsure whether to be flattered or suspicious. "Otis Monroe. Most people just call me Lucky." Victor smirked. "Lucky, huh? I imagine there's a story behind that. But for now, let's get out of this rain. I know a place where we can get a drink." With nothing better to do, I followed him through the slick streets to a quiet bar tucked into an alleyway. Inside, the warmth wrapped around me, and the bartender, a wiry man with sharp eyes, gave Victor a knowing nod. "Been a while, Langley." "Been busy," Victor replied, sliding into a booth. "2 whiskeys." I sank into the seat opposite him, running a hand through my damp hair. "All right, Langley. What's your deal?" Victor took a slow sip of his drink before answering. "No deal. Just admiration for a musician who deserves more than this. He gestured vaguely around the dimly lit bar. I've been in this business a long time. I know talent when I see it. I let out a short, bitter laugh. Talent doesn't pay my rent. Victor leaned forward, his eyes sharp. Maybe not yet. But there's a gig. A small one, but with the right audience. People who matter. I want you to take it. I studied him carefully, sensing there was more to his offer than he was letting on. Why me? A pause. Then Victor smiled, though there was something guarded behind it. Because I believe in fate, Lucky. And I think yours is about to change. I scoffed, swirling the amber liquid in my glass. You believe in fate, huh? I believe in overdue rent and bad luck. Victor chuckled, resting his elbows on the table. Bad luck is just another word for a story that hasn't finished yet. Maybe you just haven't gotten to the good part. I studied him. The way he carried himself, the way the bartender knew him, it was clear Victor Langley wasn't just another smooth talker. But I'd heard promises before. So, what's this gig? Small club, good atmosphere, he said, watching me closely. More importantly, the right ears will be there. The kind of people who can change a man's fortunes overnight. I narrowed my eyes. And what do you get out of this? Victor leaned back with an easy grin. A front row seat to your comeback. And maybe, if I'm right, the satisfaction of helping a real musician get where he belongs. I exhaled through my nose. Something about Victor's confidence was unsettling, like he already knew what I would say. I took another sip of whiskey and let the warmth settle in my chest. Fine. I'll do it. But don't expect a miracle. Victor raised his glass. Lucky, I don't need a miracle. I just need you to show up and play like you did in the rain. The rest will take care of itself. The clink of our glasses sealed the deal, but something told me this was only the beginning of a much bigger story, one I might not be ready to hear. The club was smaller than I expected. Dark, intimate. The kind of place where the music seeped into the walls and stayed there forever. I stepped onto the stage, gripping my sax like a lifeline. The air smelled of bourbon and sweat, the murmur of the audience barely audible over the clinking of glasses. Victor had been right. The right people were here. Industry folks. Musicians who mattered. And yet, none of that felt real as I adjusted the mouthpiece and took a deep breath. The only thing that felt real was the music waiting inside me, the notes buried beneath years of disappointment and regret. The first song started slow, the piano's gentle chords easing me in. My fingers trembled slightly as I pressed the keys, but once the first note left the sax, everything else faded. The music took over. I let it pour out of me, smooth, sorrowful, raw. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest. The audience leaned in, drawn by something they couldn't quite name. Even the bartender stopped polishing glasses. I could feel Victor watching from the corner, his expression unreadable. Then, halfway through my solo, I saw him. A man sat near the back of the room, half hidden in shadow. His posture was stiff, his gaze locked on me. Something about him sent a shiver down my spine. He was older, worn by time, but there was something familiar about him. I faltered, just for a second, but in music, a second is enough to lose everything. The wrong note slipped out, harsh against the melody. A murmur rippled through the crowd. I caught myself, forced my way back into the rhythm, but the damage was done. The moment had cracked. When the song ended, I barely heard the applause. My heart pounded as I scanned the room again. The man was still there, watching. Victor approached, handing me a drink. Not bad, Lucky. You had them. I ignored him. Who's that? I nodded toward the man in the shadows. Victor followed my gaze, then sighed. I was wondering when you'd notice. A lump formed in my throat. Who is he? Victor hesitated, then met my eyes. Your father. The glass nearly slipped from my hand. I swallowed hard, my breath coming in short bursts. That's not possible. It is, Victor said quietly. And he's been listening all night. I turned back toward the man, but he was already gone, leaving behind only the echo of the past and a question that burned through me. Why now? I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his face, etched with time, shadowed with regret. The way he watched me, like he was searching for something, like he wanted to speak but couldn't. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, the question gnawing at me. Why now? By morning, the city was already alive with noise. I dragged myself out of bed, my head aching from too many thoughts and too little rest. Victor was waiting for me at a diner downtown, sipping coffee like he hadn't just upended my entire world. You look like hell, he said, flipping the page of a newspaper. I slumped into the booth. You knew, didn't you? Victor set the paper aside, meeting my gaze. I had a feeling he'd show up. But I didn't know for sure. I clenched my jaw. How long have you known he was still around? Victor sighed. A while. He reached out to me months ago. Said he wanted to find you, to hear you play. But I didn't think he had the guts to actually show up. I gripped my coffee cup, my fingers tightening around the ceramic. What does he want? Victor shook his head. That's something only he can answer. The thought of facing him again made my stomach turn. He had left me and my mother without a word. Years of silence, years of absence, then suddenly he was back? I didn't buy it. People don't just return after vanishing into thin air. Where is he now? I asked, my voice rough. Victor hesitated. He's staying in town. I can arrange a meeting. I scoffed. Just like that? You think I'm ready to have a heart-to-heart over coffee? I think, Victor said carefully, that if you don't talk to him now, you'll regret it. And regret has a way of eating a man alive. I exhaled slowly, the weight of his words settling over me. Regret was something I knew all too well. It clung to me, whispered in my ear every time I played. Finally, I nodded. Fine. But I'm not making any promises. Victor nodded back. That's all I needed to hear. Later that evening, I found myself in a dimly lit bar, the kind of place where conversation stayed buried beneath cigarette smoke and whiskey fumes. Victor had set it up. My father would be here soon. I sat at a table near the back, my fingers tapping a restless rhythm against my glass. My heart pounded as I waited. And then, there he was. He walked in slowly, his movements careful, as if he expected the room to swallow him whole. His hair was grayer, his face more lined, but his eyes were the same. The same ones I used to see when I looked in the mirror. He stopped a few feet away, clearing his throat. Otis. I lifted my glass. You really got some nerve showing up after all these years. His expression flickered, hurt maybe. Or guilt. I know. Silence stretched between us, heavy and thick. I exhaled sharply. So what now? You want forgiveness? A clean slate? He lowered himself into the chair across from me, his hands folded on the table. I don't deserve that. But I need you to hear me out. I didn't know if I was ready to listen. But I stayed. And for the first time in my life, my father sat across from me, no longer a ghost of yesterday, but a man with a story I wasn't sure I wanted to hear. The silence between us stretched, fragile as glass. I studied his face, searching for the man I used to imagine when I was a boy. The father who would come back someday, full of apologies, full of love. Instead, I saw a stranger lined with years I hadn't been part of. He exhaled, running a hand over his face. I don't expect forgiveness, Otis. But I need you to know the truth. I scoffed, leaning back. Truth? You had decades to tell me the truth. Where were you? His fingers drummed on the table, then stopped. Slowly, he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small cassette tape. He set it between us. The warm plastic caught the dim light of the bar. This is where I was. I frowned. What is this? A piece of the past, he said quietly. And the reason I had to leave. I hesitated before picking it up, feeling the weight of it in my palm. It wasn't much, just a relic of another time. But it felt heavier than it should have. Play it, he urged. Then you'll understand. I clenched my jaw. And if I don't want to understand? What if I don't care anymore? His eyes, dark and tired, met mine. Then throw it away. Walk out of here and never look back. But if there's even a part of you that needs answers, listen. The weight of his words settled in my chest. I stood, slipping the tape into my jacket pocket. I'll think about it. He nodded, the ghost of a sad smile crossing his lips. That's all I can ask. That night, I sat alone in my apartment, the city humming outside my window. The tape rested on my coffee table like a loaded gun. My fingers hovered over it, then finally, I reached for my old cassette player and slid it in. A long stretch of static. Then a deep breath. And a voice I barely remembered. Otis. If you're hearing this, it means I didn't get the chance to tell you in person. I owe you the truth. About why I left. About who I was. And who I had to become. My pulse hammered in my ears. My father's voice, alive and waiting in the past, had finally found me. I sat motionless, the tape spinning, my breath caught somewhere between fear and curiosity. My father's voice, thick with years of silence, poured through the tiny speaker like a ghost whispering from another world. I never wanted to leave you, Otis. But I didn't have a choice. By the time you were old enough to remember me, I was already too deep into something I couldn't escape. My fingers clenched into fists. Lies. Excuses. That's all this was going to be. I should have stopped the tape right then, thrown it out the window. But I didn't. I let it play. Music was my life, just like it's yours. But the music world isn't all rhythm and soul. It has its debts. It has its dangers. And I got caught up in the wrong kind. A sharp inhale. A pause. I owed people, Otis. People who don't forget. And they came for me. I thought if I stayed, if I tried to be your father while they were still out there, I'd be putting you and your mother in danger. So I ran. I swallowed, my throat dry. My father, a fugitive? Running from something bigger than himself? It didn't make sense. Not yet. I tried to come back. I swear I did. But every time I got close, someone would remind me why I couldn't. You don't get to walk away from the kind of people I dealt with. And by the time they finally forgot about me, too many years had passed. I didn't know how to face you. The room felt smaller, the air heavier. My mind reeled. Part of me wanted to believe him. Another part wanted to rip the tape from the machine and smash it into 1,000 pieces. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, Otis. But if you're listening, it means you at least want to know. There's one last thing you need to hear. One last truth. And it's bigger than just me. The tape clicked, the message unfinished. A side left unplayed. I exhaled shakily, staring at the machine like it held all the answers I'd never had. My hands trembled as I reached forward, flipping the cassette to the other side. And then, with a deep breath, I pressed play. The tape word then hissed. A few seconds of dead air, like the universe itself was holding its breath. And then, his voice again, softer this time, almost hesitant. If you've made it this far, son, then you're ready to hear the rest. I hope you are. Because this part, it's not just about me. It's about you. I leaned forward, my pulse hammering. The weight in his tone was different now. Less confession, more warning. There's something I never told you, Otis. Something about your music, about why you play the way you do. It isn't just talent. It isn't just the blues in your blood. There's something else, something deeper. I frowned. What the hell was he talking about? Remember when you were a kid, and you'd pick up a tune faster than anyone else? When you played, it was like the music was already inside you, waiting to be set free? That wasn't just practice, son. That was inheritance. I shivered. Inheritance? I wasn't just running from my past, Otis. I was running from the people who knew what we carried inside of us. The ones who wanted to use it. The ones who would do anything to own it. A cold dread crept into my veins. The words felt unreal, like a bad dream I couldn't wake from. I tried to protect you from them, but I know now that was a mistake. They never forgot about me. And they sure as hell haven't forgotten about you. The recording crackled, my father taking a shaky breath. You have to be careful, Otis. You have to listen, really listen. Because soon they'll come for you too. And when they do, you need to be ready. The tape stopped. I sat frozen, my breath shallow. The silence in the room was deafening. Then, a knock at the door. My blood ran cold. The knock came again, sharper this time. I swallowed hard, my mind still reeling from the tape's final words. My father had warned me, and now someone was at my door. Slowly I stood, my feet hesitant on the worn wooden floor. The apartment was silent except for my own heartbeat hammering in my ears. Another knock. Whoever it was, they weren't leaving. I took a deep breath and opened the door. A man stood in the dim hallway, tall and wiry, his suit sharp but slightly wrinkled. He had the look of someone who spent too many hours watching people from dark corners. His eyes flicked to my face, then to the tape recorder still sitting on the table. Otis Monroe? His voice was calm, but there was something underneath it, like a current beneath still waters. I didn't answer right away. Who's asking? The man reached into his jacket, and I tensed. But instead of a weapon, he pulled out a worn business card and held it out between two fingers. Samuel Ellis, he said. I represent some interested parties. People who have been looking for you. I didn't take the card. I don't owe anyone anything. Ellis smirked. Not yet. But you will. A chill ran through me. What do you want? To talk, he said simply. About your father. About the music. And about what comes next. I hesitated. Every instinct told me to slam the door in his face. But my father's voice echoed in my head, you have to listen, really listen. So instead I stepped aside. You've got 5 minutes. Ellis walked in, taking in the room with a quick sweep of his eyes. He stopped near the tape recorder, nodding toward it. You listened. Good. That means you're already in deeper than you realize. I crossed my arms. Cut the cryptic act. What do you want? He met my gaze, serious now. Your father's debt isn't settled, Otis. And the people he ran from? They think you might be the one to pay it. The words hung between us, heavy and suffocating. I stared at Ellis, trying to measure the weight of his claim. My father's debt? After all these years? It sounded like a bad joke, but the look in Ellis's eyes told me he wasn't laughing. I exhaled through my nose. And what exactly do these people think I owe them? Ellis took a slow step closer, his voice dropping just enough to make the room feel smaller. Not money, if that's what you're thinking. Your father owed them something more valuable, his talent. And when he disappeared, they lost an investment. They want to collect on that investment, one way or another. A cold knot formed in my stomach. That's ridiculous. You can't own someone's talent. Ellis tilted his head. Can't you? Record labels try. Managers try. And the people your father got involved with? They don't ask, Otis. They take. I turned away, running a hand over my face. This was insane. I'd spent my life cursing my father's absence, blaming him for every struggle, and now I was supposed to pay for his mistakes. No, I said firmly. I don't owe them anything. My father made his choices, and I made mine. I have nothing to do with this. Ellis sighed, like he'd heard this before. You think they care about that? You carry his name, his blood, his gift. To them, that makes you part of the deal. I clenched my jaw. And what if I refuse? For the first time since he walked in, Ellis hesitated. Then they'll make you an offer you can't refuse. And if you still refuse, well, let's just say they don't believe in loose ends. My pulse pounded in my ears. This wasn't just about unfinished business, this was a threat. A life I never asked for, coming to claim me like a ghost stepping out of the past. I forced a breath, steadying my voice. So what do they want me to do? Ellis watched me for a long moment, then slid a folded piece of paper onto the table. They want you to play. One night. One show. You prove that your father's talent didn't die with him, and maybe, just maybe, they'll let you walk away. I stared at the paper but didn't touch it. The idea of stepping onto a stage under their watchful eyes sent a chill through me. But the alternative? I didn't want to think about it. Ellis adjusted his cufflinks, heading for the door. Take some time. Think it over. But don't take too long, Lucky. Some debts don't wait forever. And then he was gone, leaving behind nothing but the paper on the table, and the sinking feeling that my father's past had finally caught up with me. The paper sat on my table like a bomb waiting to go off. I hadn't touched it, hadn't opened it, but I could feel its weight pressing down on me. The choice Ellis had given me wasn't a choice at all. Play, or suffer the consequences. I ran a hand through my hair, my mind racing. One night. One show. That was all they wanted. But I knew better. Nothing was ever just one night. My fingers itched toward my saxophone case. Music had always been my escape, my sanctuary. Now, it felt like a noose tightening around my neck. My father must have felt the same way once, trapped in a game he couldn't win. I picked up the paper and unfolded it slowly. Inside was an address, a date, a time. A jazz club downtown. Midnight. A place I'd never played before but had heard whispers about, a haunt for those who lived in the shadows of the music world. This wasn't some casual gig. This was a test. The next day, I found myself standing outside Victor's place. If anyone knew what I was walking into, it was him. The door creaked open before I even knocked. I was wondering when you'd show up, Victor said, leaning against the doorframe. I stepped inside, the scent of old vinyl and whiskey thick in the air. Ellis came to see me. Says I have to play a gig to settle my father's debt. Victor sighed, rubbing his temple. I figured they'd come knocking eventually. They always do. I sat down, the weight of it all settling onto my shoulders. What happens if I don't show up? Victor poured 2 drinks, slid one across the table to me. Then you better start looking over your shoulder, Lucky. Because these people? They don't take no for an answer. I swallowed the whiskey in one go, the burn doing nothing to calm my nerves. So what do I do? Just play and hope they let me walk? Victor studied me for a long moment. You ever heard the story of Robert Johnson? I frowned. Yeah. Blues man who supposedly sold his soul to the devil. Victor nodded. That story isn't just folklore. It's a warning. Some debts don't get paid with money, Otis. They get paid in something far more valuable. I exhaled sharply, shaking my head. You think my father sold his soul? Victor's expression darkened. I think he made a deal. And now they want to see if you're worth the same price. The room felt colder, the walls pressing in. My father had left me with more than just his music, he had left me with his curse. And now, it was my turn to face it. The night of the gig arrived too soon. The city pulsed around me as I made my way to the venue, my saxophone case feeling heavier than ever. Each step felt like walking toward a ledge, the abyss yawning beneath me. This wasn't just any jazz club. This was the Majestic, a name that carried weight in the world of music. Only the best played here. And tonight, I was one of them. The marquee outside glowed with my name. Otis, Lucky Monroe, one night only. A cruel joke, maybe? Or maybe fate finally playing fair. I took a deep breath and stepped inside. The room was packed, filled with people dressed sharper than I'd ever seen. Industry professionals, musicians, critics, and somewhere among them, my father. Samuel Monroe sat in the shadows, his frame thinner, his presence quieter, but he was here. Watching. I approached the stage, my heart pounding. The band was ready, professionals who had played alongside legends. They gave me nods of recognition, but I barely saw them. My focus was on the instrument in my hands, the music waiting to break free. The first note hit the air like a spark. My fingers moved, not just with skill, but with something deeper. This wasn't just playing. This was pouring out every failure, every regret, every broken promise. The music soared, wrapping around the audience, commanding the space. For the first time in my life, I felt unstoppable. And then, it happened. A crack, sharp and sudden, split the air. My saxophone faltered mid-note. I barely had time to register what was happening before the metal groaned, the keys slipping from my fingers. The instrument broke apart in my hands, pieces tumbling to the stage floor with a sound that rang louder than any note I had played. Gasps rippled through the audience. The band stopped. Silence pressed down, thick and suffocating. My breath came in ragged bursts, my hands still frozen in midair. From the shadows, Samuel stood, his face pale. He had seen this before. He knew what this meant. Ellis, seated near the front, leaned forward with a slow smile. "Well now, Lucky," he murmured. "Looks like the past isn't done with you yet." The weight of it crashed into me. This wasn't just a gig. This wasn't just music. The debt hadn't been paid. Not yet. The silence was unbearable. My saxophone lay in ruins at my feet, the weight of a lifetime of struggle pressing down on my chest. The band waited, frozen in time. The audience held their breath. My father stood, his face lined with something I couldn't yet name. I could have run. I could have let the silence swallow me whole. But something deep inside, something older than fear, wouldn't let me. Instead, I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and let the music find another way. I sang. The first note was raw, unpolished. My voice, untrained and jagged, cut through the heavy air like a blade. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't meant to be. It was pain and love and loss, all wrapped in the blues. The words tumbled out, carrying everything I'd ever felt, everything I'd ever wanted to say. The band, hesitant at first, picked up the rhythm. The pianist filled the empty space with slow, mournful chords. The drummer tapped out a heartbeat. The bass hummed beneath me, grounding me in the moment. Together, we created something new. Something real. The audience stirred. Someone let out a low, knowing Heads nodded. Fingers tapped against tabletops. Then, like a slow-building storm, the applause began. I opened my eyes. The room wasn't silent anymore. It was alive. And in the back, my father was clapping the hardest, tears catching in the dim light. I had come here to prove myself. To settle a debt I didn't fully understand. But in that moment, I realized, this wasn't about debts. It wasn't about proving anything to anyone. This was the music finding me again, just like it always had. And this time, I wasn't letting go. The hospital room smelled of antiseptic and old regret. The beeping of the monitors filled the quiet space, a slow, steady rhythm that felt like another kind of music, one neither of us had ever played before. Samuel lay in the narrow bed, looking smaller than I remembered. Time had taken its toll, but his eyes still held the same fire, the same knowing glint that had watched me from the shadows at the Majestic. I hesitated at the door, unsure if I should be here. If I belonged in this moment. But then his gaze found mine, and he smiled, just a little. "Took you long enough." I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding and stepped inside. "Yeah, well, you always did make me wait." A chuckle rasped from his throat. "Fair enough." I sat in the chair beside him, feeling the years stretch between us. For a long time, neither of us spoke. We just sat there, letting the past settle. Then, almost as if it had never been broken, conversation found us again. We talked about music, about the old clubs he used to play in, about the time I snuck into one of his gigs as a kid. We laughed. We remembered. We played the what-if game, even though we both knew better. At some point, his hand fumbled for the nightstand, searching for something. I moved to help, but he shook his head, managing to pull open the drawer. From it, he retrieved a worn, leather-bound case. The sight of it sent a chill down my spine. He placed it in my lap, his fingers lingering on the surface. "It's yours now. Always should have been." I swallowed hard. I knew what was inside before I even opened it. My father's saxophone, the one he left behind when he walked away. The one that had once been his voice before he lost it to silence. My hands trembled as I undid the clasps and lifted the lid. The metal gleamed, aged but still beautiful. Still full of music. Still waiting. I looked back at him, my throat tight. You sure? Samuel nodded, a ghost of a smile playing on his lips. Play something for me, Lucky. Just once. I lifted the saxophone, pressing the mouthpiece to my lips. The first note was hesitant, unsure, but then the melody found me. The room faded away, the years disappeared, and for the first time in my life, I played not for an audience, not for validation, not for a debt. I played for my father. And he listened, eyes closed, as if he could hear all the things we had never said. The world outside the hospital moved on, but inside, something had shifted. The weight of the past had lifted, just a little, leaving me lighter than I'd felt in years. But life, I was learning, didn't slow down for sentiment. A few days later, Victor called. Meet me at the Blue Note. We need to talk. I found him at a corner table, his suit crisp, his demeanor unreadable. A thick folder sat between us, its presence as heavy as the conversation we were about to have. Congratulations, Lucky, he said, sliding the folder toward me. You've got a decision to make. I opened it and skimmed the pages. A contract. A real one. A recording deal with a major label. The kind of deal musicians spend their whole lives chasing. The kind my father had never been offered. This is real? I asked, my throat dry. Victor nodded. As real as it gets. A tour. A full album. Sponsorships. Your name on marquees. It should have been an easy yes. A dream come true. But then I turned to the fine print. They want me to change my sound. Soften it. Make it more marketable. Victor exhaled. It's just business, Otis. You adapt, you thrive. You make a name for yourself. I leaned back, closing the folder. And if I say no? Victor studied me for a long moment. Then you stay in the clubs, hustling for every gig, waiting for the world to catch up. I thought of my father's saxophone, now resting in my apartment. I thought of the way he had played, unfiltered, unpolished, true. I thought of what it had meant to sing in that moment of desperation, to let the music control me instead of the other way around. And I knew my answer. I pushed the folder back across the table. I appreciate the offer, Victor. But if I can't play my music my way, then it's not worth it. He sighed, shaking his head with something between disappointment and understanding. You're your father's son, Lucky. I smiled. Yeah. I think I finally am. Victor stood, smoothing out his jacket. The door's always open if you change your mind. But something tells me you won't. I watched him leave, feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time. Free. The stage was small, the crowd sparse, but none of that mattered. A single spotlight cast a warm glow over me, dust swirling in its beam like ghosts of all the songs ever played here. The wooden floor creaked beneath my feet as I adjusted my stance, the saxophone cool and familiar in my hands. The club wasn't famous. There were no record executives, no flashing cameras, no promises of stardom. Just the music, the people who came to listen, and me. I took a slow breath, closed my eyes, and played. The first note curled into the air, smooth and deep, carrying every heartbreak, every mistake, every moment that had led me here. But this time, the blues weren't a burden. They weren't something to escape. They were a part of me, something I had earned, something I could finally embrace. The melody poured out, raw and real, telling my story without a single word. And as I played, I understood, being lucky didn't matter anymore. The world could call me whatever it wanted. What mattered was the music. My music. When I finished, the room was silent for a beat, the last note lingering like a whisper of something eternal. Then, applause rose, not thunderous, not deafening, but honest. From the heart. The kind that told me I had reached them, that they had heard me. I looked out into the crowd, and there, in the dim light, I could almost see my father. Just a flicker, just a feeling. As if he was listening, nodding in approval. I smiled to myself, lifted the saxophone back to my lips, and began to play again. Because the blues never die. And neither would I.